So as we come down the hill and start turning right, sitting on the guardrails is what I thought was a big dark hippie. All of a sudden it looked at us, put its arm up like that, its right arm, put its left hand down on the guardrail and just sprung, jumped, and you can see the hair on the head, the arms, the shoulders, the body. You can see the crack of its butt. And as it went,
we don't chase the legend calls our name. We don't fear the darkness, we walk into the flame. Olympic Sasquatches beyond the dream, where the wild truth echoes on the mountain breeze. Hear the thunder roll, something ancient's watching from the forest soul. We go beyond the fair, beyond the tracks that disappear, beyond the stories, beyond the sound. Olympic Sasquatches and beyond.
In the Sasquatch community, there are voices people agree with, voices people question, and voices that create strong reactions wherever they go. Thomas Sewid is one of those voices. Born in Alert Bay, British Columbia, Thomas a member of the First Nations and Cree heritage. He is an artist, storyteller, former commercial fisherman, wilderness guide, and the man behind Sasquatch Island. For decades, Thomas has spent time in the rugged Broughton Archipelago off the northeastern coast of Vancouver Island, a region rich with wilderness, coastal history, and reports of Sasquatch. But Thomas does not approach this subject only through tracks, sightings, or campfire stories. He comes from a cultural perspective where these beings are known as Zunakwa, a figure deeply connected to First Nations art, storytelling, ceremony, and traditional knowledge. To Thomas, Sasquatch is not simply a monster in the woods, it is part of a much older conversation. A conversation about the land, about respect, about stories carried forward through generations, and about the possibility that human beings may not understand everything that exists beyond the edge of the firelight. Thomas has become one of the most outspoken figures in the Sasquatch world. He speaks directly, he has strong opinions, and he does not always say things in a way that everyone agrees with. That honesty has earned him loyal supporters and outspoken critics. But Olympic Sasquatches and Beyond was never created to be an echo chamber by showcasing figures in the community we agree with only. It was created to hear people out, to get to the truth, to allow witnesses, researchers, storytellers, and voices from different backgrounds to share what they believe, what they have experienced, and why they feel it matters. This conversation is not about forcing anyone to agree. It is about listening. It is about asking questions. And it is about making room for a perspective shaped by a lifetime connected to the Pacific Northwest, Indigenous culture, wilderness experience, and the enduring mystery of Sasquatch. Tonight, we sit down with Thomas Sewid. This is Olympic Sasquatches and Beyond.
Tell me a little bit about yourself. Like, how did you come into all this? How did you, is this something you always grown up with, or?
all my life, Sasquatch has been a part of my life as far back as I can remember. My name's Tom Sewid. My last name actually is pronounced Sewid, which means paddling towards a chief giving potlatch in the language of Kwakwala, which is from the Kwakwakiwak First Nation or North American Indians from northern Vancouver Island. And I was born on an island called Alert Bay, just off Vancouver Island, accessible by boat, plane, or British Columbia ferry. And Alert Bay is, I guess its claim to fame is it's a town with the highest concentration of Sasquatch wood carvings on Earth. There's welcoming poles, memorial totem poles in the graveyard, the world's tallest totem pole, the pillars that are carved in the ceremonial big house known as a Kilksie in Alert Bay, and they all depict crest. So going to Alert Bay is like going to King Kong Island from the movies. There's, I guess you could say, effigies of our highest ranked crest, the carvings of Tunacha. And as a young boy, you were told that you had to behave yourself. You had to do your chores, do your schoolwork, never lie, don't get in fights, don't pull temper tantrums. Otherwise, Tunacha is watching all around you. And she's not allowed to touch you, that Sasquatch. But if you misbehave and don't do what's asked of you, act up, Junappa is going to come at night with big hairy arm and reach into where you're sleeping and grab you. She'll take spruce tree sap and rub it in your eyes so you're blind, and she's going to throw you in a basket on her back, carry you deep into the forest, up a mountain to her invisible home. That's why we can't find Sasquatch. And that's where she takes the misbehaving children, boils them up and eats them. So behave yourself. That's what we're taught. I would pass that on to my children when they were young, and it keeps them in line. It's our boogeyman. It's a threat to watch out. The Sasquatch is always watching you.
Yeah.
And it works. I remember as a kid being terrified when I'd be in the village walking and you'd look up before dark and see the memorial totem poles in the graveyard, and they had the big puckered up lips like that, big breasts, sleepy eyes, and these outstretched arms. And all I could think about was, I better get home before dark, otherwise I'm misbehaving, and Junaka is going to come out of the bush and grab me with that big hairy arm. And
Yeah.
it was something being there and seeing all that. And then, they a chief would hold a potlatch in the ceremonial big house, or we had to go up to learn the dance steps for the different masks and regalia of all the animals, natural, supernatural, and from all the different elements. And then the tour ships would come, smaller ones back in the late 60s, early 70s, but they would come and be boated ashore, and the big life rafts and the buses that we used to use for school would pick up the tourists and bring them up the hill to the ceremonial big house. And the dancers of the village would perform our crests, our dances. And I remember as a kid always sitting there when you'd hear the drums start pounding, a hollow cedar log about 20 feet long with 20, 30 men around it with wooden batons pounding on it. So it'd rip like thunder. And then you'd hear that whoop, 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 coming from behind what we call a camellias, the screen. And out would come this big mask with hair and fur body, sometimes a basket on his back, sometimes without. And it would come out as soon as it got to the edge of the dance floor and do an anti-clockwise circle, which is our etiquette. And it would enter the floor and get out there and make the sound of the Sasquatch. It would yawn because it was tired. It would rub its eyes, and then it would walk, and it would represent reaching out, grabbing misbehaving children and throwing them in the basket on their back. And to me, it was one of my favorite dances to watch. And, all the tourists would be mesmerized. But unfortunately, I even remember way back then, there was no one doing a narrative saying, this is the Juno. It is our name for the Bigfoot, the Sasquatch. Then you knew that the audience would be totally enthralled, as conferences for Sasquatch are now. When Sasquatch Island, Peggy and I, my wife, when we go onto the stage, and then all of a sudden I'll be talking away, and about 10, 15 minutes into the show, you'll hear behind the screen, whoop, 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 Peggy hollering. And I say, oh, it sounds like we have a Chonach, a Sasquatch in the house. And I'd say,
Yeah.
this is what you'll see if you go to a potlatch, a ceremony of the Kwakwaka'wakw tribe. And all of a sudden, Peggy comes out with the mask that you see. We started with that one. We have another one now, fur regalia, basket on her back, and everything I just said about reenacting what an ancestor saw in regards to a Sasquatch, being spooked. It was sleeping during the daytime when my ancestor came across it. That's why it's rubbing its eyes and yawning because it just woke up. And then it goes through the dance steps as Peggy does. And it's, I watch the audience every time, and you can just see how enthralled they are, especially because it's different than a potlatch, because I'm doing what I'm doing. I'm narrating. I'm telling them what they're seeing, why it's rubbing its eyes, why is it yawning, why is it reaching out, why is it throwing like that in the basket on its back. And that's what I really wanted to bring to the Sasquatch industry, to Sasquatchology, as I call it, which is, everyone that's in it for passion, getting proof of Sasquatch, making some money, getting some spotlight time or whatever. We're a community, but
Yeah.
it's always the same old thing. It's always the same old non-Indian up on the stage talking about an encounter, speculating on what this possibly means when they tree knock and when they do this and when they do that. And to me, it's dry as a popcorn fart. You got to bring those Indians in from all the different states, provinces, and territories throughout North America, or as I call it, Sasquatch Island, and bring them on those stages so they can share their names and pronounce them properly and don't get them mixed up with other characters. Even me, I was starstruck in 2015 when Peggy and I went to Ocean Shores, the Sasquatch Summit. And there's the lineup, and there's Jeff Meldrum selling his books and other Scrog and signing books and getting pictures with people. And me, I was just, no, I jumped in line, and some 40 minutes later, I finally get up there and meet Dr. Jeff Meldrum, buy his book, get a picture taken. I still have it. And,
Yeah.
I was just, wow, that was cool. And then I go home and I start reading the book. And one night in bed with Peggy, I just threw it through the drywall and if I threw it hard enough, I probably would have went through into the neighbor's bedroom because I was so offended, so PO'd that here's this man who's a doctor and the elite of the industry of Sasquatch, and he doesn't take the time to go to Northern Vancouver Island and meet with the Kwakwaka'wakw tribe members and ask them, what is the name of your Sasquatch? Chonaka. But there's actually a male one that you only see during the potlatch ceremonies when it's mask of a male with mustache and goatee is put on a chief to be. And when he dances in his regalia with that Tonaka male one, but it's called a different name. I just can't remember. It means he's being touched by the male Sasquatch. And now no one can say that he's not worthy to be the Wallace Gekame, the big chief of that family or that clan. And so Jeff not going there to interview my people and ask them, what is your Sasquatch? It's Chunaka. And how do you say your tribal name? Kwakwaka'wakw. It
I'm glad you.
means the Kwakwala speaking people. And the male Sasquatch is called this. So he just speculated and wrote the Kwagayudal Indians from Northern Vancouver Island called their Sasquatch Bukwus. That's why I almost threw that book through the wall because that is Bukwus right here behind me. Bukwus is the 4 foot tall, hair covered bipedal creature who's the chief of the ghost world, who captures your souls when you drowned, who gives ghost food and tricks people who are lost in their life's path. And he owns their soul for almost eternity unless they can break free. But here's Jeff calling him Bukwus. And that's when I made my mind up. And Peggy and I were talking back then. And I didn't want to be another whiny, crying, sniveling, bitching Indian. I wanted to affect positive change. And I knew the stage was the best way because I'd been performing all my life, different things. And Peggy said, well, why don't you go on a podcast? And I looked at her, I'm like, what's a podcast? And she said, explained it to me. So as she walked out the door for work with Boeing at the time, I Googled podcasts, Sasquatch podcasts, and Sasquatch Chronicles came up. So I emailed through their email, Wes Germer. And, I started doing my native art. And then a couple hours later, my cell phone rang and it was Wes Germer. We spoke for maybe 5 minutes. And he goes, can I record you? I said, sure. And I did my first podcast, hour of talking. And he put it up. I don't listen to podcasts, and I still don't. And about a week later, he got a hold of me and he said, my email, my everything, basically, my switchboard's lit up. Everyone wants to hear more of the Indian from Northern Vancouver Island's beliefs, perspectives, encounters, and understanding of Sasquatch. And we did, I think, 5 or 6 more episodes. One of the most famous ones still out there called Sasquatch and Smallpox, how Sasquatch is got smallpox back when the native people of North America were getting smallpox and being decimated. So too were their clans, their tribes, their families. And Wes sort of springboarded me into the, I guess you could say, celebrity status in the Sasquatch industry, where many podcasters, wanted to hear more. I was invited to conferences and still am, television shows, movies. I'm a star in the movie Bigfoot Girl and American Sasquatch with David Paulides. I'm in numerous episodes, and that you can find on Amazon Prime. And so it's what you said to me when you said we were going to do a podcast together, and I agreed. And you wanted to focus on legacy. I guess you
Yeah.
could say that Peggy started the legacy of Tom Sewid and Sasquatch by saying you should get on a podcast, and here I am on yours now.
It's just kind of grown over time. I know people might have saw that thing on Facebook the other day, but
No, like I explained to you, it's all about you got to have controversy.
But
and also,
I wanted
basically.
Go ahead.
Yep.
Oh no, I wanted to
go ahead.
Jump back for just a moment, because you said several good things that I don't think that people realize. Well, one of the first things that you start off with, you referred to totem poles as memorial poles. So your tribe put up all these totem poles as memorials to keep explain that, the significance.
So totem pole is the sort of, I guess you could say, to us Indians, we look at it as like a Hollywood-esque, encompassing all trees that were carved are a totem pole. Sure, great. I have no qualms about that, but I educate based on legacy, pass on the true knowledge.
Yeah.
Our ceremonial big house nowadays called a gyuksi. Those used to be our homes. And we would carve all the vertical and horizontal beams in there that held up the walls and roof with crest figures of our family. And the reason why was they were also our theaters, our cathedrals, our universities of graduation, where when we held a potlatch, you were entered into your society. Your society, the one you belonged to, would perform their masks and dances if they had masks. And, some of them have, Sisu, double-headed sea monster clubs. They were warriors. And the Sisu Society. And then you have the Wolf Society, and where everyone comes out with their wolf masks and button blanket regalia. And the ones that get entered through dance, are adolescents or teenagers. When they go out and get entered into their society, I belong to the Hamatsa Society, which is the cannibal society, basically. We were the practice ceremonial ritualistic cannibalism nowadays, where it's all show and everything. But back in the day, we actually used to consume our slaves to show how powerful our chief and his Hamatsas, his Secret Service agents were. So a chieftain would have, like any leader, Secret Service agents. We Hamatsas had our teeth chipped in the fangs. We had charcoal on our faces. We wore cedar bark rings across our shoulders, around our backs. We had wristbands and knee bands of red cedar bark, and that's all the clothing we had, because we were so tough and strong and so trained that we could stand there in the rain sideways in November with sleet and not shiver, not show weakness, not show cold, not show fear. And during battle, we Hamatsas, they say, when the chief would jump on a beach out of his canoe, "Come on, men and women, charge!" We Hamatsas were so frenzied, with our hands shaking, our eyes rolled back, and our teeth clacking, that we wanted human flesh and blood of our enemies, that we would jump on our chief. We were so frenzied to try to get at the enemy. What we were actually doing was taking the arrows, the spears, the rocks from our enemies, protecting our chieftain. We were expendable, but at the same turn, we had a reputation to uphold, and we were very fierce. Like my first Hamatsa name was Kamklaslu. Kamklaslu means so fierce he even eats the bones of the humans he consumes. My name now is a big long name that ends in Bakbakwala Nuksue. Bakbakwala is the cannibal spirit from the north end of the world. My name in Hamatsa now translates to "I am Bakbakwala Nuksue," therefore I am. And I'm from the Quepusitanook tribe, and that means we're ground shakers. We're so powerful when we walk, we shake the ground like an earthquake. So the Kwakwaka'wakw Nation was always wrapped up in that whole tier structure. So your big house would have the Chonah carved in, their highest rank crest. You have it up where the chiefs and the drummers are. But outside, when you walk up to the big house, like nowadays, you might see the outstretched arms of a pole of just Juniper. That's a welcoming pole. You're saying, welcome to my ceremonial big house. This is our tribal one, but we hold the title to the highest rank crest, the Juniper. That's why she's out here. And then you have, if you go to University of Washington, you'll see a Chonach outside the Burke Museum, and it's got its arms up holding a white shield. That white shield represents the copper shields called klakwa, basically a credit card, a bank account. They had a monetary worth to them. And that's a ridicule pole because part of the shield is cut out, a quarter of it. And what that pole is telling you is that chief is saying that I have the highest rank crest, the Jonah, and my rival chieftain that I broke a piece of my copper off and gave it to him. As soon as he touched it, it went up double in value. It meant he owed me, instead of 5 war canoes, he owed me 10 as soon as he grabbed it. And every 3 months, that debt would double 100% until he paid me back in potlatch. But he never did pay me back, so I'm ridiculing him with that pole. So everyone knows, hey, how come you haven't paid your debt, buddy? You
Yeah.
know, and that's a ridicule pole. And even when we have a potlatch in the old days, you have to feed the people. You might have a feast. So they would have a log. Some of them in the museums are, 16 feet long, 4 feet thick or thicker. And it's a carved Jonah lying down on her back with her belly carved out, her breasts or thighs. And that's what the food would come in. And when they went to serve you, they would have a red cedar ladle, 5 feet long, carved in wood with a Jonah on the head, showing you that we are so powerful that we have the crest of the Jonah, and we're so wealthy that we can feed you with a feast dish made carved of a Jonah as well as a ladle. And then sometimes in the old days, the chief might call his best slave out, and he'll grab a dagger with a Jonah with hair on it, like in the museums that are still there to this day. And behind the slave, he would stab him, kill him, and say to the chieftains that are attending, who brought their secret service agents, I've killed my best slave. I give it to your Hamats as an offering. And they would pounce and devour. It was a sign of power. But Junako is always there, the Sasquatch. And so when you look at all of the Indian tribes across Sasquatch Island, North America, and you compare apples to oranges, the Kwakwaka'wakw have the strongest tie to the Sasquatch than any other tribe. Our southern brothers and sisters, who call themselves Lekweta, which they are, speak a language comparable to ours, just a few differences, but we considered them, back in up until the early 80s, they were considered to be Southern Kwakwaka'wakw. But then they stepped up and said, no, we rightfully want to be called what our tribes are. We are Lekweta, not Kwakwaka'wakw. So the Lekweta and the Kwakwaka'wakw, like brothers and sisters, cousins and family, we're the strongest tied to the Sasquatch of any other tribe out there. And it's an honor, that's why I do what I do. And still to this day, try to learn as much as I can with them, and then passing on to people that they now know that, yeah, totem pole encompasses it all. But there's welcoming poles, house posts, memorial poles that are the biggest ones that you usually see in our graveyards, that are storyboards of crests of a chieftain who died. And it tells you where he came from, his origins, and different things about his character. And then at the bottom will be that Chonacha with outstretched arms. And it's telling you that he held the crest of the Chonacha in his life. But he was so powerful and wealthy with the outstretched arms. His wealth and power was felt around the world. That's a big statement for someone who's passed.
Yeah. That's pretty powerful. A lot of strong message there and all that stuff. So you grew up with all this in your life. At what point did it go, like, at what point did, I guess what I'm asking is like, you know, like me, I grew up hearing about Bigfoot. I saw the Patty Gimlin film. Um, until I moved to Washington, there was no, this thing is real. You know, at what point did it become real for you, or has it always just been real since you grew up in that culture?
I actually just do of Jonah because of
Yeah.
being a kid on growing up. And then we moved away when I was about 7 or 8 from Alert Bay, went to the big city of Vancouver. But we'd always go up there, especially in the summer for the salmon season. I remember I was probably 11 or 12. Dad and I were driving from eastern Vancouver Island Central, Campbell River. We were driving 1 hour north to Seward and to go pick up his brother off a boat at the dock. It was dark. It was night, summertime. So it must have been around 10:30, 11 at night. I know I was tired. And we're coming down this hill on the highway and it's going to bank to the right. And I know there's a cement garbage can on the opposite lane and a pullover with a cement guardrail because there's a steep bank down to the flats. And then a couple hundred yards later, the White River. Well, as we come down the hill and start turning right, sitting on the guardrails is what I thought was a big dark hippie. All of a sudden, it looked at us, put its arm up like that, its right arm, put its left hand down on the guardrail, and just sprung, jumped. And you can see the hair on the head, the arms, the shoulders, the body. You can see the crack of its butt. And as it went and cleared the cement barrier, leaping, putting all its weight on its left arm, you could see the soles of its feet, huge feet, and it was grayish white. And poof, disappeared into the darkness. Dad swerving. He goes, "Holy, I think we just saw a Bigfoot." I'm like, "What?" And he goes, "Yeah, that was a Bigfoot, a Sasquatch, what we call Chonach." And that's when I made the connection. I said, "What do you mean that's Chonach?" And he explained. And I remember being so scared. We didn't wear seatbelts back in those days. I slid over on the truck bench seat and I was sitting bitch right beside him because I was so scared. Yet we're doing 70-mile-an-hour up the highway. Like it ain't gonna hit me. But then I made the connection what Junako was. It was Bigfoot, it was Sasquatch. And then all of a sudden I'm in Vancouver and I see the odd little news clip or a newspaper article about especially Chilliwack, Fraser River, Ruby Creek area. You'd hear the
Yeah.
odd report about a Sasquatch crossing the highway and things like that. And I guess, it was about a year later when me and the boys, hey, let's go to Saturday matinee. We're gonna go see Unsolved Mysteries. So we went and I was amazed about Loch Ness Monster, the Mayan calendar, and then all of a sudden they show the Roger Patterson, Bob Gimlin, Bluff Creek Patty, 1967. And even though it was all unstabilized and shaking, at the end you see her feet coming up like that as she's walking away. And I saw what I saw with my dad, the white, gray, big soles of a Sasquatch. And that's when I got just drawn in. I needed to know more. I was a dry sponge that needed to absorb knowledge. And that's when I went to the library at school. They didn't have that much, few books, checked them out, of course. And then I went to the Vancouver public libraries, because they're all over Vancouver. And I was introduced to John Green, Grover Krantz, Renee DeHinden, Roger Patterson, Bob Gimlin, Titmus, and the list goes on. All the old guard, Peter Byrne, and I remember just absorbing all of the books I could. And then being a commercial fisherman, traveling around British Columbia's coast, and I mean the whole coast, going to places most people never even heard of, like Clem 2, until Les Stroud went there under my direction through John Bindernagel, and Hartley Bay and Bella Bella, Haida Queen Charlotte Island, Skidegate, Masset, and Port Simpson, Port Edward, places people didn't know about. But I was there on a fish boat. And of course, people would come down, walk the dock, nosy, and also Moccasin Telegraph. We've got to talk, got to, exchange
Yeah.
information. But I was always Tommy 10,000 question. What is your tribe called? Sasquatch. Oh, books, steamed them, Holocaust, or whatever. And what do you know about them? They would just spill information. And, you just imagine that these native communities, very rarely would they see tourists go there. They'll see tugboats and doctors and transport boats and airplanes come and go. But to actually have someone come in and be so interested to know about their stories, beliefs, perspectives, understanding of the Sasquatch, they just poured forth. This young kid, teenager, and then, in my 20s, they knew me. I remember pulling into Clem 2 one time, and someone goes, "Oh, you got to go talk to so and so. He had a Sasquatch encounter this winter." So I went up to his house, knocked on the door, and "Oh yeah, I know who you are. Come on in." He goes, "I'll tell you about what I saw up at the lake." And I still to this day, I was up there 3 years ago in Bella Bella, and I probably had 20, 25 different encounters told to me because everyone knew, "Oh, that's Tommy Sewid, Sasquatch Island, the guy we see on TV, here on podcasts, read his posts on Facebook." So, it's nice, now that I have that, I call it what it is, celebrity status and Sasquatchology in the industry. And people want to talk to me. And, especially my fellow North American Indians, because a lot of them are so apprehensive to talk to non-Indians because they've been, see people making money off us and they don't get a thing, coming to our communities and, getting their pit videos and everything like that. And what legacy did they leave? They didn't leave someone to say, "Oh yeah, geez, every 3 months I get a quarterly royalty check because I was in that TV series." You never hear
Yeah.
that. And that's put a bad taste in a lot of North American Indians, where now you see the Yazzies with Don't Whistle at Night podcast going up like a rocket after it leaves the launch pad. And they've only been active for a year. And then you have Mel Scahan. He's all over the place at conferences,
Yeah.
hosting his year coming up. You got Shelley Covington, Montana, Native Indian woman doing DNA stuff and investigating. She's all over the conference circuit. And, you got Sailor Sasquatch. They've been around a bit. We just did a 2-night, 3-day expedition with them, joining forces with them at Squatch Watcher Ranch here on the Olympic Peninsula. And, we heard things, quite a bit of things we heard over the 3 days and nights. And, but the recognition now for the North American Indian is more people want to know about us. More Indians are getting involved with the industry, podcasting, video casting, video production, like Peggy and I and Sailor Sasquatch. And that's what we need to see so that we don't see the mistakes Dr. Jeff Meldrum and others made. Oh, the Quagga or Quackatoodle Indians from northern Vancouver Island, their Sasquatch is Chonaha. No, they go.
We'll be right back after a quick word from one of our sponsors. In the heart of Forks, Washington, surrounded by mist, rainforest, and mystery, there is a place where the legend doesn't just live in stories. It welcomes you through the door, Sasquatch. The legend is more than a gift shop. It is a museum, a destination, and a gathering place for believers, researchers, families, travelers, and anyone who has ever wondered what waits beyond the tree line. Inside, you'll find Sasquatch apparel, books, artwork, souvenirs, mugs, toys, games, outdoor gear, photo ops, and a one-of-a-kind atmosphere built around the mystery of the Pacific Northwest. Whether you are passing through Forks, exploring the Olympic Peninsula, or chasing the legend itself, this is one stop you do not want to miss. Olympic Sasquatches and Beyond is proud to recognize Sasquatch, the legend in Forks, Washington, as an official sponsor of our show. Support the store that supports the search. Sasquatch, the legend. You came to Forks looking for the legend. Now step inside it. And now, back to the conversation.
And that's what the legacy is all about. Get more Indians involved so that we know the names and know what the boundaries are. Like some tribes don't even talk about Sasquatch or the little people, Bokwis. And, people go storming into Indian reserves. And that's why we have tribal police now and guardians in our tribal territories in British Columbia. We don't have tribal police. We have native guardians, watchmen. And they're there ready to pounce on anyone that wants to go film Sasquatch or go shoot them. Like there's a guy that won't say his name, but he's well known in the circuit, making movies and everything. Well, he was advertising for so many $1,000. You can go with him to British Columbia coastal area off Vancouver Island this July.
Uh, I, I'll say
Everyone
his
knows.
name. I don't care. I know who you're talking about. Todd Standing.
No, not Rod Standing.
Oh, okay, never mind.
Stephen Major. But everyone
Oh,
knows his
okay.
MO to kill a
Oh, okay.
Bigfoot. He made a poster that is his MO to kill a Bigfoot.
Yeah,
Crosshairs.
okay.
You got pictures of
Yeah.
him with machine guns and pistols and shotguns
No,
and
yeah,
shooting flame 12 gauges. His
I
whole
forgot about
MO
him.
is to kill a Sasquatch, but he's going to go up to northern Vancouver Island to the Kwakwaka'wakw tribal territories of one of our tribes with people paying over $6,000 with the intent of killing Sasquatch. Well, I've already given the heads up to the tribes and the guardians and the watchmen and border security as well. He's got a red flag now if he tries to enter Canada, even though he's a half Canadian citizen, because his sole intent is to kill a Sasquatch. And if you talk to the 647 plus Indian tribes in North America, Sasquatch Island, we all share one common understanding. Don't you ever think of killing or hunting a Sasquatch, for they are just members of the other tribe. So that's what we have to be very guarded with, like that mountain monster show. I can't even stomach watching it. I got invited Peggy and I got invited to a conference, and mountain monsters were in the lineup. And I declined to go to that southeastern state to make, number one, make money because we get our day rate and we get our travel, our accommodation, our vendor table. We make more money selling my native art and t-shirts and tumblers like that and coffee mugs and so forth. I declined it because that people from that TV show were there. I will not put myself in the same pavilion with those yahoos because they're
No.
so disrespectful to Sasquatch.
Yeah, absolutely. And there's just, you don't really have to hoax anything. I always get discouraged when I see that. That there's that, I don't want to say their name or anything, but there was that one conference that I declined early on overseas because I found out that there was some stuff going on there that probably should not be going on there. I just don't want to associate with anything like that, kind of like you. But getting back to Meldrum and stuff, you're absolutely right. There is so much that has been put out there, like the buckwass and the tuna, like the misinformation. And so I think it is really great to see people like you and to see people like Mel, the gentleman we just had on the show the other day, James, share his experience. But I also understand the living up here. It's going to be hard not to run into tribal members. There's tribes everywhere up here, unlike there is in the South. And I run into so many, and even doing this podcast, I've had a bunch reach out and say, hey, I'll tell you this, but I don't want to talk about it publicly. Let's not talk about it publicly. And I'm like, hey, I'm cool with that. I respect that. Because this, for me, my situation back in Quinault. For me, I'm quite satisfied with that they exist. I have no need to prove that it exists. This is more of a journey now than anything, just learning and how much I just want to know more about what they are and what they do, and so that's what it is for me. But I'm glad to see people like yourself, like Mel and all these others coming out and starting to do your own thing, because for so long it's just been silent, and kind of like when you were a kid,
you also got to watch the other flip side of the coin with us Indians. Yeah. I watch and follow too, and I see some of them that I just roll my eyes and shake my head in disgust. You can tell that they're concrete Indians. They don't know jack bugger all about the bush. I remember 10 years ago, one of the Sasquatch shows, they had this, even I was 127 pounds heavier back then too. I had more chins than a Chinese phone book and a face that looked like a basketball blown up too much. But I remember watching him, and he was way bigger than me, and the camouflage shirt was so tight of a button pop to take your eye out at 60 feet, and you could tell he was a slurpy sucking pizza eating drive-through concrete Indian who didn't know jack bugger all about the bush. Where I come with a lifetime of bush experience, like Squatch Watcher Ranch. When I sit there with Jimmy, who's one of the property owners, and I'm teaching him everything I can. He's invited us on his family's acreage with his blessing of his brothers and aunties and everyone else, and they're all elders, and they got massive amounts of Sasquatch activity on there. But it's done very ethically and with a lot of integrity because we have a very binding contract that covers all points. And when I mentioned, what about, Sarah and Jonathan coming up, and he's like, oh, yeah, no problem. But they were explained by Jimmy right when they got on property. Here's the guardrails. Here's the boundaries. Here's where you can go and can't go. And here's what you can film and can't film. And, and it was, really good. And it was the first one. There'll be many more, and, I got a big list of people in the know with Sasquatch, especially here on the Olympic Peninsula that Jimmy wants to meet, sit around the campfire and chatter with a bunch of Sasquatches because that's his whole MO. But at the same time, you hear that, Peggy? You hear that, Matt? Yeah, I heard that. Yeah, our audio recorder, it's on now. It turned on at 10 o'clock. Are we going to capture that? So it's working together as teams and sharing each other's information and, get invited to go out investigating like we did last year when we went up to Yahoo Lake,
Yahoo
me,
Lake.
you and Edgecombe and Peggy, most Sasquatch groups, it's I, me, and only me. And I am the Sasquatch Bigfoot expert. And no one knows anything better than me. Like Todd Neese, that's where I got no use for the bugger. But,
Yeah.
When you talk legacy, and this is what this episode is about, it is about legacy. So someone can watch it 30 years from now and go, I knew that about that person and that team. And they were saying it back then that we have to vet who and what we're bringing to our conferences, who we're going to go pay money for to go take us on an expedition, who is so full of bunk and BS, their eyes are brown, like what the name you mentioned a few minutes ago, and others that we know that are so full of BS, their eyes should be brown. And that's what the legacy is all about. And, Peggy tries to restrain me quite a bit, but it's no, you got to mean what you say and say what you mean. And every now and then grab someone by the collar, pull them in as your fist goes like that and drive them a few, 3, 4, a dozen times. Because that's the problem with our community. There's so many egomaniacs that want spotlight time, and I'm the expert of this, and I'm the expert of that. And you got to believe in the porthole jumping, cloaking, mind speaking, orb turning, UFO flying Sasquatch, because that's the truth. And it cloaked. I tell you, Tom, it cloaked. You're so full of shit. Your eyes should be brown because there's none of that supernatural stuff. They are critters. They are humans. They are what Dr. Jeff Meldrum taught us and is teaching us with his legacy in his book and books and YouTube. And it's what Nagel taught us and is teaching us with his YouTube channel and books. And what Grover Krantz opened the door on. They are just creatures, living, breathing creatures that leave tracks, leave fecal piles and whatever, and are heard, but most of all, they are seen. And that's the legacy. And that's why I sat there for the last 4 or 5 days after we spoke and kept communicating. We got to say what we mean and mean what we say, and so that people understand that some of the people that were part of the industry in the 2000 to 2026 period, they weren't good people, and they were in it for their own personal financial gains and grandeur. And you got to remember, half of the people that you see, like I'm following all these new posters with AI now. Everyone's producing a poster. And it's good because most of the posters and the art are really captivating, like the one behind you, and the ones you've been producing. I like them. I personally like AI art, except when they go native art, they should be shot. But anyway, because they're our property, they're our press. The drugstore here in Forks has made in the Philippines and China and Korea native wood carved art that isn't even wood indigenous to North America. And they're selling them like hotcakes to these ignorant tourists from around United States, North America, and the world. But that's stolen property. When you see a crest of a Chonacha and it's done by an artist, that belongs to that artist and his chief and his family, whether it be
Mhm.
a Sasquatch or an eagle, a raven, a fish, a whale. And plagiarizing that is just outright theft. And Peggy and I went into a Sasquatch museum here on Washington State a couple of years ago with Andre, our Sasquatch Island chapter president that you know well,
Yeah.
and from Minnesota. And there was a plate in the museum with my Sasquatch on the wall right there. That's the original. And here was the plagiarized, traced version on a plate that was given an honor to the owner of the museum. You're such a great guy. I made you this piece of native art on a plate. What she should have said was, here, I really like you, but I went and stole a crest from a family and a well known Sasquatch investigator named Tom Sewid. I basically kicked his front door down, stole his crest, put it on the plate. Here's a gift. Aren't I an honorable person? That's the truth and reality about it.
Yeah.
And,
Yeah.
this, and, now with your video, now someone's going to watch this 30, 40, 50 years from now, maybe on the Mars or the dark side of the moon and go, yeah, you see, that's why no one should do native art unless they belong to that family tribe because it's private property.
Yeah. Yeah. I will say, like the thumbnail that I made the other day, I did a lot of research and it's similar, but it's not the same as anything that they have. So I didn't steal nobody's. I just made something that resembles similarity to,
I'd be careful.
to be careful.
There's a
And,
group.
and I made sure before I put it out there, I asked one of my friends, I was like, hey, would this be okay? He's like, I think that would be okay. I'm like, okay.
But you did
So,
something to me. You told me of your native Indian bloodlines, even though you don't have a
yeah.
card. You have
Yeah.
those bloodlines. So as long as you can back it up that you have native blood, all the power to you. But
Oh, yeah.
but I, not to you, but to the listeners, if you're thinking of doing native art and you don't have a Indian treaty card, then you might want to look on Facebook and search for fraudulent native art. There's this huge push going across North America right now of native Indians that have had enough with people plagiarizing, taking, stealing their crests and designs. And, you know, I watch it. The natives are hostile. They even
Yeah.
bombed an art gallery up in British Columbia a year and a half ago because they were selling knockoff native art made in Indonesia. So it's getting that violent, that radical. So it's best, like I say, is like personally, I've never done a design of Jesus or the Virgin Mary. Number one, Virgin Mary. I'm not Catholic. I'm Anglican, but I wouldn't think of doing it because to me, I look at the Indian way. It's not my crest. It's sort of forced into my culture and heritage, by the Christians. But at the same time, I am a Christian, but I'm not going to cross that line. And that's where, like, I saved up a whole bunch of AI when it first started getting popular in the winter there of all these native Indian AI Sasquatches. I was saving them because I was actually looking at some of them going, I kind of like how they did that form or that style and so forth. But the other day I was going through my phone and I said, this is just stolen property. I shouldn't even have it in possession. So I deleted 27 of these AI images because they were supposed Indian Sasquatches. And I was just like, no, what about these kids that come to the store and they have this rough beginning, but they have the passion, the dedication, the devotion to take a piece of wood or a canvas and paint a native design. Even though I know I have one kid, I felt so sorry for him. I paid him $30 for a canvas painting and I threw it in the dumpster. I just gave him the money because I knew he needed it. But there's no way I can sell that in SasquatchLegend.com, the store I manage here in Forks.
Yeah.
And it was ugly as well. But I did it just to help my fellow Indian. But when
Yeah.
you see these young up and comings, and because I belong to so many native Indian art Facebook groups, the ones that are putting everything they can into it so they can get that unforgettable moment like me when I remember going in with a wood carving and the woman at the gallery basically gave me a good swack of constructive criticism. I can see pencil lines. This isn't straight enough. This. How much are you saying you want for it? $50? Yeah, I can do that. I'll give you 50. I was so proud. A native art gallery on Vancouver Island bought this teenager's carving with painting. And the next one I did, I just had her in my ears, no
Yeah.
pencil marks. And still to this day, some 40 plus years later, I can still hear that white haired woman who's probably long gone, been dead, guiding me. No pencil lines. Keep your lines straight. Don't be lazy. Do double and triple coats. And if there is a drop, sand it off, remove it, or add another color. And, that's legacy. And with
Yeah.
AI and people doing Sasquatches and other animals, and they're not Indian, well, all of a sudden we're seeing it now. There's this group on Facebook constantly coming up, and they were charging $74 a print for a design. Now they're up
Wow.
to 109 because they're getting so popular that people want these AI native Indian designs, but they're not doing the research. Are these actually made by an Indian? No, they're made by someone probably in Korea.
China.
But what about that poor kid now that can't sell his art because the gallery was in the buy-in season of May, knew they were budgeted for 20 grand, bought 20 grand worth of native art originals, but 5,000 of it was AI produced stuff that was made offshore. But when that little Indian kid came in, they didn't have any budget to pay $30 to buy that design off him and give that little douse of fuel on his spark to ignite an inferno like that woman did to me when I was a teenager.
Yeah.
And now that kid goes, what should I even do? I think I'll just smoke that doobie with that white powder they put in there. And the next thing you know, he's 6 feet under, OD'd, or got shot because he was doing a B&E for his drug addiction. And that's the truth and reality. And that's the legacy of AI, what it's now producing and will produce.
Yeah. Yeah. It could definitely be a negative. I think it could go both ways. It depends on, kind of like a gun. It's in the user's hand, right? How it's used. But that's one thing I try to do, like on the show. If I do have, like James, who's Dela Cruz, who just came on the show, he's native. He does wood carvings, and that's one of the ways he supports himself. And at the very end of the show, we dedicated a whole segment, showed him carving and stuffing, and gave people. Now he says he's blowed up on orders, which is good for him.
So this is one I'm working on right now. That's going to be hair on it, like the one behind me, all painted black and red. I'm going to try to make it a lot of wrinkle lines and everything, like the Sasquatches I've seen up close. But that's the Jonah mask with the puckered up lips, and and it's like you're the guy you interviewed. Yeah, I know what it's like, and I'm the same way. It's I got a lot of orders.
We'll do the same thing at the end of this episode.
Take the time to do them.
Yeah, and we'll do the same thing at the end of this episode. We'll showcase your work and how people can purchase it.
And people can go to SasquatchLegend.com as well. I manage the store here in Forks, and I have a lot of my originals are made into T-shirts, mugs, shower curtains, bath mats, coffee mugs, and the list goes on. I can't wait till I get a bobblehead of one of my designs.
That'll be cool.
Yeah.
So you had going back a little bit. We kind of took a little side road there. Going back, so you had this sighting. You saw the what your dad said was a tunaquah sitting on a guardrail, and then you just became enthralled in it. At what point did you start going out looking for it on your own? You're doing the fishing thing, and you're getting all these tips and everything. At what point did you say, you know what, Tom's got to get out there, and I got to look?
I guess it was early 1990s. I had a phenomenal sighting on anchored out with my commercial fish boat off northeastern Vancouver Island in my ancestral island of Village Island. Native anchorage, had my 26-foot trailer was on the beach with a 10x10 addition I built with my crew. And we used it for a native watchman's program during the summer in our abandoned native village because of the fallen totem poles that were on the ground. See, I called it generic totem poles, but so everyone understands. And then the big pillars that were not intricately carved, but this fluted design, like grooves all around it, still standing. But there's so many books written about Village Island, aka Mama village of a last potlatch. But anyway, a lot of history there. Google it, check it out. But I was a native watchman there, and we'd had a close encounter of the hairy kind. A year or two later is when we anchored out there and had a really good encounter where we saw and
We don't chase the legend calls our name. We don't fear the darkness, we walk into the flame. Olympic Sasquatch